Tēnā tātou katoa, I te tuatahi me mihi ka tika kia koutou, te komiti, nā koutou I homai tēnei wā kia mātou o Iarau. Ko riki a hoani wā katoa kuingoa, e moko puna tēnei no ngā te awa no te whakatohia no naitai, no te whanā pane, kei roto rua e noho ana, e te pimai au I konei, he whāngai au ki te hapu o Ngāti Ngārara Nui, ki te iwi o Ngāti Whakauwe, tēnā rawa atu kia koutou katoa. I'd like to firstly begin by introducing Iarau, which is our kaupapa here in Rotorua. It has the privilege of working with iwi and hapu across the motu in relation to what the Crown or the councils might like to call resource management, but we would like to refer to as taonga protection. We spend a lot of our time out on the ground with our iwi and hapu who struggle with an inability of most Crown or council, local and central government agencies being able to comprehend their role in the protection of their taonga affirmed through Te Tiriti o Waitangi. And so our work is about integrating those perspectives and integrating the differences and the intricacies, not difficulties, of our iwi and hapu into modern day planning contexts across the motu. And we're very privileged to be able to do that work and to be supported by our iwi to support them. I'd like to make a couple of points around Te Tiriti o Waitangi to begin with, to kind of frame the context of this particular submission. The first is that obviously Te Tiriti o Waitangi was signed between two sovereign nations, the British Crown sovereignty existing in England and the sovereignty of Ngā Rangatira o Ngā Hapu o Nutirini existing here in Aotearoa. The Waitangi Tribunal, as we all know, found through the Waitin 40 Te Paparahi o Te Raki inquiry that in 2014 that Māori never ceded sovereignty to the Crown, making us and our hapu still the sovereign here in Aotearoa. There are 3 articles to Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and in the simplest form, we've got first up kāwanatanga, where Māori delegate the Crown governance, which was our right to do so as affirmed by signing he whakaputanga, and clarity on that is that the governance was over non-Māori here in Aotearoa. Article 2, tino rangatiratanga, Māori retain absolute authority over their lands, resources, taonga. And then number 3, and I think this is where David Seymour has this particularly wrong in relation to this bill, is that the Crown must actively protect Māori rights while treating us as equal to non-Māori. And so his basis for equality washes out the fact that equality comes with a responsibility of the Crown to actively protect Māori rights. That simple breakdown confirms that this is not an issue of race. This is an issue of Māori and non-Māori having different rights, but those different rights creating a nation that we can all exist under and work together with. And it also debunks David Seymour's dangerous misinformation campaign, making this a race issue and allowing those that are less informed or incapable of understanding that their right to be here as non-Māori and Aotearoa is impinged on their rights being different to those of Māori. It kind of frames that in a way that sucks them in and thinks that this is a race issue, but it's really not. And by making this a race issue, it's almost a form of ethnic cleansing by attempting to make us all one race, when in reality we're a people with 2 different sets of rights. The bill is an intentional attempt at secondary colonisation of an already oppressed people and actually dressed up as equality. It distorts Te Tiriti and attempts to erase Māori rights while preying on the ill-informed public. This particular bill, I think, will cause temporary treaty breaches, which is going to cost the country a lot more money. The bill's recklessness is particularly visible in its lack of depth. And what I would say is if I was an unethical person without morals, I probably could have written the bill on a plane ride in a notebook from Rotorua to Wellington. And we can see that, and it's exposed by the fact that the bill could just simply be ripped in half between the hands of Hana Rāwhiti Maipi Clark. That act was not just symbolic, it demonstrated its intellectual and constitutional weakness as an embarrassment to Crown law. In terms of David Seymour's submission, he was questioned about the protection of Māori rights and interests by Debbie Ngāri Wapaka, and he responded by complaining about consultation obligations and resource consents, implying that consultation with iwi and hapu is an inconvenience to businesses and developers. One thing that this misses is that Māori operate under the same consent laws as everyone else. It also fails to recognise that iwi and hapu are the rightful holders of tino rangatiratanga over their lands, fisheries and taonga, and that if consultation was to be removed by what he calls 2 parties, the party that would actually rightfully need to be removed under Te Tiriti o Waitangi would be any non-Māori entities party to consultation, because they're interfering with the management of Māori land and taonga. And we can confirm that our people never wished to not have tino rangatiratanga over their lands, fisheries and taonga. So therefore it would be the other party, not Māori, that would lose their opportunity to participate in that particular consultation. Of course, that doesn't fit the dangerously tunnel visioned agenda, and we as Māori wouldn't want other parties to be cut out of an opportunity to be consulted on potential consents. One of the things that I would like to specifically talk about today is the role of tangata tiriti here in Aotearoa. Here at Iarau, we have the privilege of working alongside many tangata tiriti, and in amongst the chaos and mess that has been caused under this government, I just wanted to acknowledge those that understand that Te Tiriti is not an exclusionary document, and that it creates space for 2 different sets of rights to exist, in recognition of that reality together as a nation. And a mihi to all of those who have stood alongside and amongst the Toitu Te Tiriti activations around the country, and also submitted submissions into this particular process in opposition of this bill. The government, or this government and this bill, says it wants one law for all, but Te Tiriti was never about equality, and so the equality flag again becomes a really big issue. It was about partnership. Māori rights obviously existed here in Aotearoa before 1840. Te Tiriti affirms them. Non-Māori rights were granted through Te Tiriti. So that distinction is really critical, and it's one that's missed in almost all discussions around this particular bill. If this government was actually serious about equality, it would have been applied when Māori were dispossessed of their land, excluded from economic systems, overrepresented in poverty statistics, and denied fair legal representation. Only now, when Māori are asserting their pre-existing rights, does this government suddenly decide that equality matters. It's basically weaponised discrimination. The last thing that I'd like to say is that this bill is obviously a political stunt, and we can refer back to a $26 million flag referendum designed to obviously bring in a new flag, which many people viewed as John Key's personal pet project. It also became a large public issue because it wasn't a referendum that was informed necessarily by public demands. And what we can see through this particular process is that public demand is that this whole conversation around te tiriti just doesn't even happen, and that we work to, I guess, form a new constitution for this country that embeds te tiriti o Waitangi in the country's overarching constitution. We're not here as a people to demand equality. We don't want equality as Māori because equality doesn't honour te tiriti o Waitangi. The last thing that I'd like to say today in relation to tino rangatiratanga is a big mihi to our whānau no te iwi o te kāhui maunga. Me ngā iwi o te motu e noho tai ana I raro I te kāhui maunga I tēnei wā. Yesterday was a classy example of what tino rangatiratanga in relation to one of the many taonga of te ao Māori, in this case te ao haka, looks like here in Aotearoa. And the differences of the many iwi there, how they carried themselves and how they come together ki te whakaraura I ngā taonga a kuima, a koroma, was a beautiful sight and a beautiful opportunity for us to really look at what the future of Aotearoa looks like if we allow Māori to take their rightful place and have tino rangatiratanga over their taonga. Nō reira, kei te mihi atu kia koutou, ka motu taka kōrero.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. There's not much time, well, there's no time there for questions, unfortunately. So what we'll do is we'll wrap up the session. Oh, wait, hang on, we don't have the next two submissions. Okay, well, I'll offer the two questions. So we'll start with Todd and then Hannah.
Thank you. Excuse me, thank you. Your submission was very clear, and you believe, obviously, that Māori do have separate rights guaranteed to them by the treaty. And so would it be true then to say that your ancestry would decide whether you have those rights or not?
I think the thing that it makes it about ancestry, again, tries to tie this back to race, right? Which I'm saying that this is not a race issue. It's an inherent placement of Māori. Māori were here in Aotearoa when non-Māori arrived here in Aotearoa, and our placement at that time affirms that we have different rights. So not ancestry related, it's about time and place instead.
Mr. Chair, if I can follow, yeah, so explain then how I would just know if I had Māori had these extra rights that you say Māori have. How do I know as a person?
Your whakapapa, right? It is a whakapapa thing because my whakapapa as a Māori means that I was here in Aotearoa and I had those rights before non-Māori arrived here in Aotearoa.
Okay, thank you.
Hannah Rafferty, Mikey Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā rā koe, ai te tuahine kanoe aku mihi kia koe me tō kōrero kai whai te ata nei. I think Iarau is a true example of partnership and working in between our whānau hapu, locally led, community led kaupapa initiatives, and really guiding our whānau through, as you said, te aki taonga and pepeha whakapapa. So I just want to, if you could just elaborate, if this bill was to go through, or a bill like this, not saying that this wouldn't, the regulatory statutory bill, or anything that has the same perspective, what angst would this cause among our hapu, iwi, and the partners that you work with, if any?
I think one of the issues that we've got is over the last probably 10 years, we've been able to build relationships with people or with entities, local governments, central governments, that haven't had an entrenched view that Māori and hapu perspectives in relation to taonga protection, te aki taonga, te aki taiao didn't exist or weren't important. And so building these relationships has allowed us to reach a point where we can work collaboratively in relation to how the next generation or the next genesis of what that process looks like in Aotearoa actually is. When the requirements come from the law, when the requirements for these people to consider us are gone, we're left with a small few who actually care and actually want to maintain those relationships. And those are the people that I would call tangata tiriti. But if the legal requirement is gone, those that don't care about the relationship and don't understand the role of iwi and hapu here in Aotearoa and our tino rangatiratanga, we lose that opportunity to sit at that table with them and teach them about our way of life and a better way of doing things and how things should be done. And it doesn't mean that our tino rangatiratanga doesn't exist, it just makes it harder. And in actual fact, it'll cost the country more money, because one thing I will tell you is that our people will fight to the bitter end for our tino rangatiratanga and to protect our taiao. And it'll cost the country more money to do that, because eventually, we're just going to keep putting up every barricade that we possibly can.
Thanks, folks. That's probably the time for this morning. So, Alahia, thank you for spending the morning with us and for providing your submissions.
I do like the fact that extra time was able to be added so we could ask questions.
Yeah, that was a I can't really add much onto that, because that was a powerhouse submission that I
noticed Todd was literally in a tongue twister to ask a question.
Yeah, I mean, he asked the question there that was clearly set up to give him the answer that he really wanted. The submitter there gave an answer that was pretty straight up and correct, and then he reworded it back in a way that gave him an answer that that fit his political narrative.
Yeah.
So it almost didn't matter what the submitter said; he would have then reworded it back into a way that fit his political narrative, which is pretty understandable. But that was an incredible submission. Yeah.
Oh, we got room for one more. So
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok, News Guide, the Order Paper Podcast. YouTube, Twitch, Instagram, TikTok.